I'm more than happy to start this online expert discussion, which is titled Ukrainian European Integration in the Focus of Russian Propaganda, Analysis of the Information Space of Bulgaria and Romania. And I'd like to invite to our discussion prominent experts in the field of informational security, Roberta Raducu, a PhD assistant professor at the National University of Political Studies and Public Administration, communication expert at the New Strategy Center, Romania. Thank you for joining us. Igor.
Hello.
Hello. Igor Fedyk, head of the Southeastern Europe section at the New Geopolitics Research Network from Bulgaria. Thank you, Igor, for participating.
Hello to everyone.
And also Rumena Filipova joining us, director of the Institute for Global Analytics in Bulgaria. We are waiting and hopefully Plamen Dimitrov, editor-in-chief of the Bulgarian Army newspaper from Bulgaria, will also join us soon. And also we have an expert from Romania, Răzvan Ceuca, external relations expert at the New Strategy Center, and also Ekaterina Dadiverina, international expert at the New Strategy Center, Romania. Thank you so much for joining us. And today, me, Volodymyr Solovyan, a PhD, head of Hybrid Warfare Analytical Group at the Ukraine Crisis Media Center, will host and moderate this fruitful discussion. And I'd like also mention that the event is held within the Ukraine Crisis Media Center project, Paving Ukraine's Path to the European Union, informational dissemination, informational dimension. And that is a part of the project which will cover Russian and Eurosceptical attempts to undermine the idea of European integration of Ukraine, as well as other Eastern European countries, given the attempts of Russia to undermine the support for Ukraine and the general idea of European perspective for Ukraine. And under the project will be covered informational space of Romania, Bulgaria, as well as Poland and Czech Republic. But today, this discussion is also dedicated to the presentation of an analytical note undermining Ukrainian European integration, discrediting attempts in the informational space of Romania and Bulgaria. And our prominent experts contributed to this report creation, Roberta Raducu and Igor Fedyk. So I hope that we will discuss and present this note, which will be published soon after our discussion, and you will find the direct link on the description of this video in YouTube, as well as in the it will be also published at the website of Ukraine Crisis Media Center. So today, main topics are pro-Russia narratives and disinformation actors, which are active after February 24 of 2022 in the informational space of Bulgaria and Romania. And also we'll focus on assessments of Russia's ability to undermine the support of idea of European integration of Ukraine in Romania and Bulgaria by informational means. And last but not least, another topic is recommendations for countering pro-Russian disinformation activities in Romania and Bulgaria, and hopefully we will address these recommendations to the governmental bodies of Ukraine, as well as Bulgaria and Romania. I'd also like to mention that this event is organized with the support of European Union and the International Renaissance Foundation with the framework of European Renaissance of Ukraine project, and its content is the exclusive responsibility of the authors and does not necessarily reflect the views of European Union and the International Renaissance Foundation. So to start our discussion, I'd like to remind that in December 2023, the Council of European Union recommended to launch the negotiations between Ukraine and European Union in terms of Ukrainian European integration, but at the same time that launched the campaign by pro-Russian actors in European countries with aim to discredit Ukraine and Ukrainians, which was obviously aimed at not only against Ukraine as a state, but against Ukrainian society and Ukrainian refugees that found the safety places in European countries. And the direct target for Russians are the countries which border with Ukraine because of military supplies and attempts by Russia to restrict Ukrainian export and to harm Ukrainian economy, which is vital for Ukraine in terms of total war and Russian attempts to undermine resilience of Ukrainian society to sustain in this prolonged war and conduct effective attempts to not just to deter Russia, but also to reconquer territories which are still occupied by Russians. So one of the main goals of Russian informational influence in European countries is to discredit the idea of European enlargement, and Ukraine is a vital point for Russia because of the perspective for Ukraine is other countries of the region, which Moscow view as historically satellites of its informational and also geopolitical influence, is a mortal danger for its imperial ambitions. That is why despite of the lack of prospects for strategic success in the war in Ukraine, the Kremlin maintains its hopes to push Ukraine out of the European path. And one of the means to do so is to harm the bilateral relations between Ukraine and the border countries. And today we are focusing on Romania and Bulgaria because these countries are very vital for support for Ukraine, not just in terms of military support, but also in terms of export of Ukrainian goods. And that poses a really challenge for us to find out how Russia tried to undermine positions of Ukraine and to disrupt and also portray Ukraine in these countries. But also, which is from my perspective is will be quite interesting to focus on is activities of pro-Russian and Eurosceptical actors in these countries, because these forces are natural allies of Russians, and we may also figure out whether we may talk about splits and some kind of chains between Russians and these forces, or this just a theoretical issue which should be followed and become a subject of further investigations. So to start with, I'd like to give the floors to Roberta Raducu and ask her to present her notes and main findings in regard of our analytical note undermining Ukrainian European integration, discrediting attempts in the informational space of Romania and Bulgaria. And obviously, Roberta will focus on Romanian dimension. So thank you, and please, the floor is yours.
Hello, just a second. So I managed to, technology since COVID, I haven't been able to quite work with this. So now it's just remembering old tricks, let's say. Okay, so today I'm going to talk about the information space of Romania and what's happening there with the Russian propaganda that's trying to undermine the Ukrainian European integration. And I would really like to start my speech with a very, very dear quote of mine. It's from an author that's called Yuval Noah Harari. He wrote a couple of books, really well known in the Romanian space at least. Sapiens and Homo Deus. And this one says the following: but fiction has enabled us not merely to imagine things, but to do so collectively. We can weave common myths such as modern states. It was a long enumeration, but I really like the fact that um, the modern states were seen as mere fiction. Of course, it has a double sense, but I would like to emphasize on the meaning that anything we desire can become reality when we fight for it collectively. Maybe this is exactly what the Russian propaganda is trying to do, to divide and tear us apart, our common will to unite, let's say so, with Ukraine in Europe. And having this in mind, I want to, let's say, enumerate the following means that the Russian propaganda is trying to do so. In the Romanian space, in this informational space, the narratives can be linked to Russian propaganda against the Ukrainian Euro integration, mainly by populist rhetoric, invoking inaccurate or, let's say, just some false opportunities and threats arising from the Romanian border crisis. Main narratives in this regards are the cultural and religious ties that Romanians and Russians have. Well, this is a complex history that we're facing. It's just an extraction of some information and it's decontextualized very, very much. As well, among these narratives are the potential economic benefits and the increased natural resources that Romanians could have if we, let's say, join Russian efforts to discredit Ukraine. But we have to remember that Russians and Romanians had previous limited cooperation, and there are a lot of lingering past tensions on a lot of subjects. So the Romanian support towards Russia was never an option. Like, it was literally never an option. Of course, there were some revisionist attitudes and territorial claims that happened in Romania from some politicians. But these claims managed somehow to forget the fact that the Soviet Union was the one annexing those territories as part of the Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact. So again, a lot of inaccuracies and a lot of decontextualization of some historical facts that somehow sound familiar to some people, but without further research may be believable. But with some little research, anyone can see that these are merely some narratives. Another subject that might be at stake and let's say may influence the Romanian support towards the Ukrainian Euro integration might be the subjects that appeal to whataboutism, like neo-Nazis in Ukraine. You know, this and this and neo-Nazis in Ukraine. Okay, but Ukraine has a law condemning communist and national socialist or totalitarian regimes. So how can you say that country would support something that the law objects towards? It just doesn't make any sense. As well, some narratives point towards a violent and untrusty Ukraine and try to build some war-related anxieties, as well as skepticism related to globalization, xenophobia, discrimination of Romanians inside their own country. Of course, these are some exaggerated facts. They are decontextualized in a lot of ways. And in some ways, some of them are even untrue. For example, the war-related anxieties were built onto some security reassurances that the Romanian government would give the Kiev government, but in fact that was purely not true. It was a mere discussion about security among the borders, and nothing of that sort really happened. But because it was so accusing and so infuriating, a lot of people started to have these anxieties related to the war. Other themes related to the Ukrainian Euro integration could be the cost of accession. And of course, this information is somewhat true. Any country that accedes to the European Union implies some costs. Romania, when it acceded to the European Union as well, implied some costs, but the benefits will be visible in time, and the long-term benefits are way more, you can see them, you can touch them, but in a long term. And there's also the competition for grain export. There's a myth in Romania that Romania used to be feeding the Europe, but this is not quite true. It's decontextualized in a lot of ways. And of course, Ukraine joining the European Union would actually mean a very strong ally in these grain exports, and not a competition at all. Regarding the challenges that might be considered, and some little small suggestions for measures that would help alleviate these narratives and would help alleviate any kind of anxieties, would be related to the Romanian minorities in Ukraine, because this is a constant attack that some politicians make in our informational space. But constant communication about their situation, constant communication about their rights and measures, demonstrating that they are respected Ukrainian citizens, I'm very much sure would alleviate any kind of anxieties related to this subject. As well, the corruption cases, Romania is known for its fights against the corruption in our own government. We had a long line of strikes starting 2016 and up to, I think the last one was 2018 or 19. Of course, we have some fears in this regard. And of course, we want to see proofs of responsibility and efforts combating corruption. So this would be like, we've been there, you are there too, let's fight this together, and let's see how we progress together in this regard. And also there are some problems with differences in quality standards. Thinking of a country that is just making some progress toward acceding to the European Union status would make sense that some people would understand that meeting all the quality standards is a process, as it has been for all of us, but apparently not for some. So clear communication and openness that will alleviate anxieties and build trust towards the progresses that are made towards implementing all the bureaucracy, because European Union, of course, is a lot of bureaucracy, but this indeed makes the quality standards stand so high. So just seeing those efforts being made towards acceding to this standards would mean a lot for the Romanian people in the media. And I would like to conclude with this message. The Romanian support for Ukraine's Euro integration is strategically advantageous for both countries. We want Ukraine to accede to the European Union because a successful accession of Ukraine would also mean a successful accession of Moldova. And Romanians are very fond of this accession as well. Romania wants Moldova to join the EU, so supporting Ukraine's victory in the war and subsequent EU membership is critical to achieving that goal. So from our part, I'm very sure that full support is going to be granted. As our politicians and main political parties say, So I want to come back to what I said previously in the first message. As you can see, the European borders are in our mere imagination. And if we could imagine it in a way, we can extend it anytime. So this is what I had to say, and you definitely have our full support. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Roberta. It's a very inspiring and really insightful presentation. Hopefully, we will have an opportunity to discuss it a little bit later. But now I'd like to give floors to Igor, and also I address him my gratitude for his support for our analytical note, and I also like him to ask to present his insights and recommendations for Bulgarian authorities, maybe Ukrainian as well, and also main outputs which we may focus on in regard of analytical note. So please, Igor, you're welcome.
Yes, thank you very much. Do you hear me well?
Yes.
Yes, okay, great. As for the Russian propaganda and disinformation in Bulgaria, so in the country itself, they don't stop repeating at different levels, from the state leadership to non-governmental organizations and media. The country is at the front line of the Russian hybrid warfare against Europe. And this is true, and it's also obvious for me as a foreigner in this country. The reason for that is that the bilateral Bulgarian-Russian historical, cultural, religious, and economic ties. And Russia, due to this, Russia still, unfortunately for this country, for this beautiful country, still manages to exert a significant influence on various spheres of life of it. The consequence of this is that voters under the influence of Russian propaganda, they go to the polling stations and make the choice in favor of pro-Russian politicians. Fortunately, so far, the number in the parliament does not allow them to significantly influence Bulgaria's position towards Ukraine, as well as towards two organizations which Bulgaria is part of, I mean, European Union and NATO. However, the increase may lead to negative changes in this matter. As for the propaganda, disinformation itself, one of the main tools of the Russian hybrid warfare against Bulgaria. It's often is nothing else than information and psychological operations. And a special place in this operation is given to Ukraine and Russian aggression against it. So Russia's anti-Ukrainian activities in the information space of Bulgaria began to gain momentum after Russia annexed Crimea and occupied parts of Donetsk and Luhansk regions in 2014, but significantly increased after February 24, 2022. And the main goals of the Russian anti-Ukrainian propaganda and disinformation in Bulgaria are to discredit Ukraine, its political leadership and armed forces, as well as to oppose Bulgaria's support for our country, from military aid to the process of European integration. And why the developments in Bulgaria, especially regarding Russian activities in it, are so important for Ukraine? Because Bulgaria is one of the countries that support Ukraine. And it's quite important, actually. Unfortunately, the Ukrainian society does not know much about Bulgarian military aid. To a larger extent, it's due to the fact that aid is not public. a little light on how important the Bulgarian aid was shed by the Die Welt's publication titled "The Country That Secretly Saved Ukraine," in which was written that Bulgaria secretly helped Ukraine in spring of 2022 when Ukraine army was in dire need of ammunition and fuel. Another important thing that Bulgaria has a serious potential for military aid to Ukraine. Being once the part of the Warsaw Pact, the main task of Bulgaria was the production of ammunition, and thus Bulgaria became the largest producer of Soviet ammunition outside the Soviet Union. In practice, this means that Bulgaria has now both large production facilities and stocks in warehouses. In addition to ammunition, Bulgaria can also transfer a sufficient number of weapons and military equipment to Ukraine, such as, for example, anti-tank guns, self-propelled mortars, self-propelled howitzers, anti-tank systems, man-pads, tanks, and even air defense systems. And another important point is that the potential Bulgarian defense industry for bilateral military technical cooperation with Ukraine. So the joint activities with foreign partners in which part of the technologies and personnel could be moved on a permanent or temporary base to safe production sites are very important for Ukraine today. And such sites as an option can be located in Bulgaria. As you see, the significance of aid and support from Bulgaria to Ukraine are quite important and relevant. And to impede it, Russia uses all its available resources, especially propaganda and disinformation. As for recommendations, I can name some, but here we have also prominent Bulgarian expert. I think they would say more. I wouldn't touch Bulgaria. I will just say that these measures, just my observation. So it should be understood that if Bulgarian political elites don't have the understanding that Russian propaganda and disinformation pose a real threat to the nation's security and public welfare of the country, and if they don't have the political will to implement the recommendation that will be mentioned a bit later, Russia will continue to effectively implement on Bulgarian territory its harmful informational influence. As for Ukraine, what could be done to strengthen its presence in the information space of Bulgaria? I think, for example, could be the activation of bilateral relations at both the state and non-governmental levels, strengthening improving the quality of informational component of work of Ukrainian diplomatic institutions accredited in Bulgaria. Also, expansion of cooperation between media of Ukraine and Bulgaria, and conducting events in Bulgaria aimed at providing the Bulgarian society with true information about Ukraine and forming a positive attitude towards Ukraine and Ukrainians in it. But just in case of the Bulgarian political elites at the state level in Ukraine, it's necessary to understand that the above-mentioned measures are necessary and that appropriate resources should be allocated to them. Without that, the result will not be as it should have been. So this is all so far from our side, and we'll be glad to participate in further discussion.
Thank you, Igor, so much. And I think that we shall keep our eyes and attention on Bulgaria, as we already discussed, and Igor presented the main points of his analysis regarding the analytical node. So now I'd like to give floors to Rumena Filipova, director of the Institute for Global Analytics. And as far as I know, she prepared a brief presentation, so maybe we may also have a look, and maybe later we will also discuss and get some insightful information. And so please, you're welcome.
Thank you so much, first of all, for the invitation, and also congratulations on the new study. It's a very important topic, and as the EU accession process for Ukraine is happening, we also need to study and preempt all of the informational attempts on the part of Russia to undermine this process. So, as was mentioned by Volodymyr, I would like to share my presentation. Right, so I hope you see it well. Yeah, so I'm going to situate the attempts to undermine Ukraine's European integration in the wider political, social, and media context in Bulgaria, which unfortunately is conducive to actually enabling these undermining processes. As regards the political context first, there are two parties in particular that stand out and which are not friendly to Ukraine's cause, but also they're also quite Eurosceptic. So first of all, I would definitely like to highlight the positions of Revival, which is far right pro-Russian party in Bulgaria. In general, it aims to undercut Bulgaria's EU membership by calling for initiatives that quote unquote renegotiating the terms of Bulgaria's EU membership, whatever that renegotiation might mean. And the Bulgarian far right, just like its counterparts also in other parts of Europe, aims to undermine all common European policies and all decision making which is taken in concert with other EU member states. So, therefore, Revival has firmly come up against the initiative to introduce quality majority voting and remove the veto power of member states, which of course would be very helpful to overcome the obstacles introduced by such countries as Hungary, as we saw quite recently, that they can undermine the whole of the EU's common policy. So there may be consensus among all of the other 26 member states, but this imposition of the veto undermines the whole position of the European Union, which might unfortunately happen also with regards to enlargement. Secondly, the second issue area in which the Revival is quite active has been a very vociferous campaign against the introduction of the euro in Bulgaria through the propagandist claim that it will lead to economic impoverishment and infringement on national sovereignty. So these are examples of two concrete ways in which Revival attempts to undermine the whole of Bulgaria's position within the European Union and in concert with other far-right parties, the shared policies of EU countries in general. Now, as regards NATO, there the rhetoric is even more outrightly aggressive in that Revival has called and actually mounted an initiative for an exit referendum from the alliance. Now, these Eurosceptic and NATO skeptic discourses are matched by anti-Ukrainian messaging, which is some of the most virulent in Bulgaria. So, first of all, they repeat the so-called peace claim. They argue that they're in favor of peace, but of course, peace on Russia's terms, as they understand it. Also, they have taken up the topic of the so-called dispatch of troops to Ukraine, pandering to fears about the fact that Bulgaria might become directly involved in the war. And also, they have repeatedly, since the beginning of the invasion of Russia of Ukraine in 2022, uh, spoken about the supposedly insidious effect of sanctions on Russia on the Bulgarian economy. So these are the overall elements of the far right discourse, which is both anti-European and also anti-Ukrainian. I would like to mention the other political party in Bulgaria, which is also quite vociferously pro-Russian, but may seem as being a little bit more subdued in certain situations, which is, of course, the Bulgarian Socialist Party. And here I would actually like to share the findings of our most recent study, which was published just yesterday in cooperation with Political Capital in Hungary. And it looks at the voting patterns of MEPs in 7 Central European countries, among them Bulgaria, also Romania, the V4, and Austria. And one of the major conclusions that comes out of this study regarding the behavior of Bulgaria's European representatives is that the Bulgarian Socialist Party stands out among its Bulgarian counterparts, but also from its counterparts in the Socialist and Democrats political family in defending the Kremlin regime, in that they tend to abstain or they do not vote, they do not take part in voting on Russia and China critical resolutions that have been advanced in the European Parliament over the course of its most recent term between 2019 and ending in 2024. And also, the Bulgarian Socialist Party has, in this way, defended Kremlin interests and has not supported resolutions in favor of Ukraine's further integration in the European Union, but also Moldova's and Georgia. So, all those initiatives, resolutions in the EP, which promote the further enlargement of the union have not been supported by the Bulgarian Socialist Party. This may not be very widely known here in Bulgaria, as discussions may not always focus on the process of accession, but this is how Bulgaria's MEPs behave in the European Parliament. Of course, there are, in addition to Revival and the Bulgarian Socialist Party, there are other actors throughout the political scene, some of them smaller, others bigger, who to various extent also promote pro-Russian messaging. But I would now like to turn to the wider social environment, because it enables pro-Russian messaging on the part of politicians, and they actually capitalize on these pro-Russian sentiments. So in a recent report that we published at the end of last year, we examined a role of Russian historical disinformation in Bulgaria, and because history has been weaponized by the Kremlin, of course, in the Ukrainian case, in the attempted justification for the war, but also it has been weaponized in third countries as well. So just briefly, you can find the report on our website, but in a nutshell, my argument is that Russia's historical disinformation and influence on the Bulgarians' historical perceptions dating back to the independence gained from the Ottoman Empire at the end of the 19th century actually makes the Bulgarians receptive to all other specific types of Kremlin narratives. So this cultural, historical influencing, falsification, and distortion stands at the very heart of the Bulgarians' predisposition to receiving Kremlin messaging. So in the report, we look at three main pillars or carriers of historical memory on which Russia has an impact here in the country. First, this is the issue of history textbooks. So we reviewed all of the textbooks used for teaching Bulgarian history in particular throughout the educational system. And what was identified was, first of all, an evasion of the discussion of Russia's typically negative role in Bulgarian history, so silencing those negative effects. And also positive depictions of Moscow as a liberator, as a so-called liberator and savior of Bulgaria, even though historically relations have been very fraught, at least since the beginning of the 20th century. Second pillar is monumental heritage. You might be surprised or not to know that a lot of Soviet era statues still remain in place in Bulgaria. So there were some positive moves in Sofia last year, at the end of last year, as the a monument dedicated to the Soviet army in Sofia was dismantled. But a lot of those monuments still remain in central squares in a lot of Bulgarian cities. And finally, the media space, which is very predisposed to taking up pro-Kremlin messaging, especially those related to history and culture. We reviewed the media space for a year on both social media and also online print, so-called mainstream media. And pro-Russian disinformation tends to be activated around critical historical moments or commemorations or national holidays. So this is the overall culture and historically distorted environment and how Russia has been active in the propaganda space in Bulgaria for at least a century and a half. And these narratives and these distortions actually have a very real impact on how Bulgarians think nowadays. This is done through the public opinion the polling that we have conducted in cooperation with Globsec. So for a number of consecutive years, we see very persistent leanings to authoritarian states in Bulgaria. So a majority of the Bulgarians does not view Russia as a threat. So 57% in both 2023 and 2024 think that way, which is a very high percentage rate. And later on, I will compare it to the rest of Central and Eastern Europe, but this is basically the highest result in the polled countries. Youth are not that different from the rest of society. So even though we may think that youth should be necessarily more democratic or more pro-Western, we actually see that they're not that different. Exactly because of the fact that the content of history textbooks very much remains unchanged. So over half of them think that Russia is not a threat. And also, interestingly, an overwhelming majority of the Bulgarians do not view China as a threat. So I'd like to illustrate those public opinion trends in showing that there are very permissive views to far-right nationalists in Bulgaria. And here I would especially like to focus on young people, so 18 to 34-year-olds, in that you can see that the 40% of them, so the blue, dark blue column to the very left of us, shows that only 40% think that far-right nationalists represent a threat to identity and values, but this percentage is much higher in other age groups, and 10% more think that way in the 55 plus age group. So it does not come as a surprise that the far-right party like Revival has been gaining traction in the public space and making inroads in the youth vote also. Now, how Bulgarians assess the Kremlin's war against Ukraine. Now, this has been a persistent pattern since the very beginning of Russia's reinvasion of Ukraine. There hasn't been any change in public opinion on that front, since more Bulgarians overall think that the West and or Ukraine are to be blamed for the start of Russia's aggression. So you can see these two graphs are for 2023. On top, we have the results for 2023, and at the bottom for 2024. And 47% altogether of the Bulgarians in both years think that Ukraine or the West started the war, and almost 44% think as it is that the West started the war. So if we talk about public perceptions, we see that there is a lot of fertile soil actually for the dissemination of pro-Russian messaging. Since Bulgarians remain undecided on something which should be pretty easy to assess. And we do not see many other EU countries which are so divided in their assessment of the war. Now, this is how Bulgaria is situated across Central and Eastern Europe. You can, in this graph in particular, measures perception of Russia as a threat to one's country and assessments as to whether Russia is trying to weaken the EU and NATO. We see that Bulgaria is at the very bottom here. The blue column measures perception that Russia is trying to weaken the EU and NATO. This is the lowest. The Bulgarians record the lowest result on this measure across the Central East European countries that we included in the survey. And the same applies to also consideration of Russia as a security threat. This is a very low percentage rate indeed, so only 34% of Bulgarians think that way. Of course, in comparison to Poland, for instance, up to 90%, but even lower than than Hungary and also Slovakia, which, as we know, have a virulent pro-Russian sentiment, but also on the level of politics. So Bulgaria stands out, and this is not the first year in which these results have been recorded. So I would like to wrap it up here, and just to say that Ukraine's further integration in the EU and how this is represented in the Bulgarian space is subject to a lot of distortion and disinformation, precisely because of the malign political actors, but also because of the overall cultural, social, media environment in the country, which is still conducive to pro-Russian sentiments. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rumena, for a very insightful and fruitful presentation. I find it, and I think that all of us find it very insightful. And also yesterday I was reading also this study, History Undone. I find it very great piece of analysis, and also that is very unfortunately underestimated dimension of the informational warfare is historical books and education for students, pupils. And we in Ukraine Crisis Media Center also addressed many times to this challenge, because we faced with attempts by Russian to educate Ukrainian peoples on occupied territories. And if you know, Russia imposed a new playbook for it is a common playbook for Russian schools, and that is a very interesting topic to investigate on how Russia tried to implement main propagandistic narratives of current Putin's regime into the educational system, and how that reflects to the common sense of being, and how that is also a leverage of occupation of Ukrainian society, not just on a means of territory, but also in their mental space. So now, and that was really very insightful. So now I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Plamen Dimitrov. So we will stay in Bulgaria for a while, and given that soon there will be next parliamentary elections, just fifth during last several years, and the common issue whether Ukraine may somehow lose support from Bulgarian government after the upcoming elections. Do you perceive this campaign as a threat in terms of support for Ukraine and Ukrainian integration from Bulgaria, from Sofia. Is the threat real just for now? Thanks.
Thank you, Vladimir. I do not prepare special presentation, and also it was useful that Rumena describes some political parties in Bulgaria that are pro-Russian. So such political parties were presented in all Bulgarian parliaments after 1990s. And for sure, such political parties will enter the next Bulgarian parliament, will enter also the European Parliament. So in Bulgaria, we have maybe a constant group of people that vote for these pro-Russian parties. They just changed the name and the organizational structure. Before that, it was Ataka political party. Now we have this revival, Възраждане political party. But I think the voters are almost the same that vote for these parties. And here we have to have in mind that there are some prerequisites in Bulgaria for such behavior of part of the voters. First of all, it is history. Bulgaria was very intensively connected with Russia in previous decades, in previous centuries. And second factor, it is the language. For all Bulgarians that are older than 50 years, maybe, 45, 50 years old, they understand Russian language and then can directly consume these products of Russian propaganda. Of course, it's not the case in Ukraine where 100% of Ukrainians understand Russian, but anyway, in Bulgaria, some of our citizens follow Russian media outlets, Russian websites, Russian Telegram channels, etc. And also maybe because of that, we have a group of people in Bulgaria that are belong to this group of so-called useful idiots. They are not paid from Russia. They do not follow even the strict instructions from Russian propaganda, but it's just their natural behavior and their views and their perceptions. I think it's a part of broader anti-liberal discourse that we have in Bulgaria. Many of those people do not praise directly Vladimir Putin, Kremlin, Russia, etc., but they have anti-liberal visions, and as a part of these anti-liberal visions, they support Russian policy and Russian narratives. It's also important that Russia itself position itself as a stronghold of conservative values, and it is also attractive for some people in Bulgaria. Also, nationalistic behavior is very strong in Bulgaria. Usually, Bulgarian nationalists tend to support Russia. Of course, with some nuances. We used to have one nationalistic party, Internal Macedonian Revolutionary Organization, that was presented in the previous governments in Bulgaria. That was not openly pro-Russian, but just because nationalists are anti-liberal, most often they support Russian narratives. And speaking about the next Bulgarian parliament, I think it is sure that these political parties with Euro-Atlantic orientation are going to have majority in the next parliament. I mean, the biggest one its GEP political party. Also, we continue the change, Democratic Bulgaria, and also the party that represents Turkish minority in Bulgaria, Movement for Rights and Freedoms. So combined, these three political subjects for sure will have more than 50% of the members of the parliament after the elections. And having in mind this situation, I think there is no danger that the next Bulgarian regular government will not support Ukraine. Maybe the foreign policy will be this part of the government that will be preserved. Doesn't matter what will be the exact government configuration after the elections. So for sure, Bulgaria will continue to support Ukraine, but we have to have in mind this very strong pro-Russian sentiments in Bulgarian society also. That's the situation. And speaking about European Parliament, this biggest pro-Russian political party revival, Возрождение, for the time being do not belong to particular European political family. And it's not sure where they are going to go after the elections. But it is clear that this political party that will have most probably 3 members of the European Parliament will support this nationalistic, pro-Russian, ultra-rights political families in the European Parliament. But anyway, Bulgaria is not a big country, and that's why the number of members of the European Parliament from this party will not be that big. But this particular intentions and inclines in the Bulgarian society will continue to exist. And I think Russian propaganda will continue to be active on Bulgarian territory among the Bulgarian voters in the future. That's all from me.
Thank you so much, Mr. Dimitrov, for this complicated picture of Bulgarian political landscape. So I suggest that we may return to the issue of European elections to the European Parliament a little bit later, and that may become the part of conclusion of our discussion for today. But now I think that it's time to turn to Romania, and we also have our prominent colleagues from New Strategy Center. So I'd like first to ask Răzvan Ceuca to provide us his insights, and I also know that he prepared some presentation for us, so maybe we will also follow some slides, and we will also have an opportunity to discuss and to figure out the perception of the concept of tactical narratives and how they diverge from strategic narratives which Russia tries to impose into the informational space of Romania. So, Răzvan, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Volodymyr. Very great discussion, by the way. So I'm glad to present this exceptional study published under the auspices of the New Strategy Center. Actually, it was published last year, and it addresses this very specific topic of Russian strategic and tactical narratives, either pro-Russian or anti-Ukraine. First of all, I think we have to look at let's say the context of the study so far, and the geopolitical context where this Russian information warfare actually takes place. Romania has a very important strategic has a very important strategic position for Ukraine's experts because it's the main hub for Ukrainian grain exports that, in the context of the militarization of the Black Sea. Also, Romania's geographical location is not an amplifier for the Permian line influence, surprisingly, even though we have the Romanian Orthodox Church, which in some cases has some ties with the Russian Orthodox Church, but there are many factors contributing to this lack of leverages from the Kremlin to exert its malign influence in Romania. First of all, we have the negative experiences in our historical interaction with Russia or the USSR. Furthermore, we have, let's say, Russia, which has a limited economic, cultural, and political capability to affect domestic events. And last but not least, Russia understands very well that it cannot control basically the Romanian population through the promotion of Russian strategic narratives and tactical narratives in Romania. And therefore, it has a tailor-made strategy consisting in telling a different story from other countries in the region. Therefore, I have outlined some of these tactical narratives. First of all, I think we have to look at the theoretical framework because we need to differentiate between strategic narratives, which are explanations of events in language and ideology, theory, or belief that point the way to future actions. Strategic narratives usually tend to be more coherent, less emotional, and have a long-term impact. For instance, when you think about Moscow, the Third Rome, or Russia as a fortress always under siege from NATO and the EU, or the defense battle, the third defense battle for Sevastopol. These are myths that actually tend to convince the Russian population that Russia is fighting a defensive war against the West, even though that war tends to be, in most of the historical cases, provoked by Moscow itself, ironically. On the other hand, we have the tactical narrative, which basically serve as individual steps to strengthen the validity of strategic narratives. That is why they are more emotional, they're less coherent, and they are more short-term. For instance, you might see tactical narratives that are present in the Romanian information space at the moment, and after the European election or after the presidential election, they might disappear permanently or just for a while. It depends on Moscow's objectives concerning Romania, but also on internal actors that try to disseminate these narratives and try to promote them as much as possible to convince a part, at least, of the Romanian audience that Ukraine is a sort of an enemy and Russia has all the legitimate purposes to do what it does in Ukraine after all. The first tactical narrative targeting Romanian audience stipulates that Romania aids Ukrainian refugees rather than its own residents affected by the worst economic fallout. And here I have expected some declarations from certain, let's say, Russian propaganda amplifiers in Romania, either politicians, either political parties, or even other political factions. One of them argues that we are going through hard times here in the country, so prices are exploding, hospitals are burning, people are dying of hunger and folding their phones, and in the meantime, we are helping Ukrainians, even though we don't have the resources to help ourselves. And on the other hand, someone stipulated that one truth we must tell is that far too many funds have been allocated for the refugees who came from Ukraine. Romania being one of the main, let's say, welcomers, along with Poland and other neighboring countries, just after the February 24 invasion. Another tactical narrative argues that Ukraine took over Romanian territories and manifest some sort of abusive behavior towards the Romanian minority in Ukraine. That's why we don't have to help Ukraine anymore. Arguing that Romania no longer has to help Ukraine if Romanians from Chernihiv still more. Indeed, this narrative was very catchy for the Romanian audience because they have those census with Ukrainians concerning the Romanian minority in Chernihiv, especially in the case of preserving the Romanian language in Romanian schools in the region. because there is that controversial law that actually eliminated those language quotas for Romanians living in Ukraine. The third narrative, the tactical narrative, which was very related to the controversy surrounding the Bulgaria Canal, declares that economic protectionism for Romanian farmers has to be implemented by lobbying for a ban on Ukrainian agricultural imports and transit from Ukraine to and to Romania. This narrative had a very, let's say, moderate impact last year when there was an issue with the Bulgaria Canal on the Danube, when the Romanian authorities actually accused Kyiv of trying to undermine the economic efficiency of the Sulina Canal owned by Romania by making some dragger operations, even though Kyiv actually warned the Romanian administration in Bucharest that it is going to make some operations over there without affecting the economic potential of the Danube on the Romanian side. But also other parties, some actors try to disseminate the idea that Ukraine intervened despite international restrictions and changes the Danube's federal elected system. But as I have previously mentioned, this is not the case because we've warned the Romanian authorities that it is going to do that those operations. Even though, according to the Russian propaganda, regrettably Ukraine is following Russia's lead, harming another country, appealing to some emotions in order to put Ukraine in the same category as an enemy that tries to harm the economy and infrastructure of other countries, just like, for instance, Russia attacked Ukraine's energy infrastructure. And last but not least, the Romanian government must prohibit the import of cereals, milk, and other agricultural products from Ukraine or Romanian territory, which is not a tactical narrative specific for Romania, but as we all know here, it gained traction, it gained emotional traction in Poland as well, and even created some tensions between Warsaw and Kyiv due to the fact that it affected the economic competition in terms of export grain and affected the Polish farmers' production. This happened in Romania as well, but to my humble opinion, I have to say that Romania actually found a very diplomatic way to solve this issue without being forced to warn Kyiv that it is going to transition and limit and restrict its support for as long as they are going to sell these grains in accordance with the European conditions, basically economic conditions and prices. And last but not least, without actually naming someone, there are some political actors in Romania who, according to the Ukrainian and Moldovan intelligence, have been found to have ties with the Russian intelligence dating back to 2011-2012, which have been uncovered in the context of Russia's full-scale invasion. Therefore, their supporters actually accused the Ukrainian intelligence community of being racketeers and launching an offensive campaign against the Romanian unionists, because some of those actors actually tend to promote a very unionist and very nationalist approach, both in Romania and especially towards Moldova. So they are called traditional opponents of Romania and the Republic of Moldova. Interests have begun a continuous onslaught against our country's most recognized unionist politicians, basically demonizing Ukraine as some sort of an enemy of Romania's tendency and diplomacy towards unification, the ideal of unification of between Romania and Ukraine. Okay. Thank you very much for your attention, and looking forward to any curiosities or questions after the last presentation.
Thank you, Răzvan, so much for description of the main narratives which Russia tries to impose into the informational space of Romania. That was very insightful, and I think that the readers of Ukraine Crisis Media Center website, and as well as other partner websites will be very interested in such findings, which in Ukraine sometimes we left from our attention, but it is very fruitful to get such insights from experts of the region. And now I'd like to ask Ekaterina Dediverina, who is also expert at the New Strategy Center, to give her perspective of Russian informational presence in Romania. And also I know that Ekaterina was among authors of a prominent piece of analysis, Russia's hybrid warfare in the Republic of Moldova, and given the importance of success of Moldova's Euro integration path, as well as for Ukraine and for Romania. So we have a compliant interest for both Ukraine and Romania in terms of success of Moldovan Euro integration, because that is also a target for Russian disinformation activities to undermine Moldova's Euro integration. And Ukraine and Moldova are, from perspective of European countries, are pursued as the two countries which should move in comparison, and we are not still separated. So Moldova's success is Ukraine's success as well. Maybe you can provide us some insights regarding this study of Russia's hybrid warfare in the Republic of Moldova, or any other notes that are quite actual in terms of our today's topic. So please.
Thank you. I'd like to say congratulations for the new study, and I'm pretty sure it is and it will be useful for Ukraine, for Romania, for Bulgaria, and for Republic of Moldova. I totally agree that while waging large-scale armed aggression against Ukraine, Russia is also actively undertaking a hybrid war against the rest of the democratic world. However, even in Ukraine, we observe that Russia employs a wide array of warfare strategies, ranging from kinetic to hybrid tactics. For example, in 2023, the key objectives of Kremlin propaganda in Ukraine were discrediting Kyiv military and political leadership, splitting the Ukrainian elite, demoralizing Ukrainian troops, and disorienting the Ukrainian population. Now we see that the Kremlin conducts a vast disinformation campaign to undermine President Zelensky at any cost. Even President Putin consistently emphasizes the legitimacy of Ukrainian president at every opportunity. Kremlin propaganda regarding Romania is often closely intertwined with Moldova. Last year, New Strategy Center published a study analyzing the hybrid war waged by Russia against the Republic of Moldova. I am one of the authors of this study. For this study, we used information from open sources, as well as relevant information obtained as a result of a documentation visit organized by the New Strategy Center in the Republic of Moldova in January 2023. So, as you see, we have a hands-on approach on monitoring this aspect of Russian hybrid war in Europe, especially in Balkan region. Russia uses platforms such as TikTok to spread false and biased news. We know that message sent towards Romanians from the very beginning of the war in Ukraine was that Russians and Ukrainians are brothers, and there is no reason to implicate in this problem or to help in every way Ukraine and Ukrainians refugees in Romania as well. Also, I'd like to add a very important detail about Russian House in Bucharest. In February 2023, Romania decided to suspend after 10 years the activity of the Russian House in Bucharest, an institution that had become a propaganda agency used by the Kremlin to justify the invasion of Ukraine and to propagate anti-Western discourse. I want to give one example of narratives which are used in order to continue anti-Europe and anti-NATO policy of Kremlin in Romania. NATO is building a network of cyber laboratories along Russia's borders in Estonia, Latvia, Finland, Romania, and in the future in Georgia and Moldova. It is a declaration of Mr. Lukmanov, Director of Department of International Information Security of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in the Russian Federation. It means that Kremlin is saying that countries like Romania are engaged in a hybrid war against Russia. This message is very similar with previous declaration about American biological laboratories in Ukraine. The declaration has the intention of discrediting NATO, building distrust among allies, and among Ukrainians supporting the adherence to EU and NATO. In my opinion, a significant and effective propaganda campaign aimed at strengthening relations between Ukraine and Romania has been rooted in language issues. The Ukrainian regions bordering Romania, Chernivtsi in the west and Odessa in the south, have Romanian ethnic populations. In these regions, the minority studies two different languages in school, Romanian in Chernivtsi and Moldovan in Odessa, a practice originating from the Soviet period. This policy appears to be designed to minimize the historical cultural ties between Ukraine and Romania. As our CEO, Mr. Scutaru, used to say, we have the opportunity to build the relations between Ukraine and Romania on a completely different basis. Although we have been so close for almost 30 years, we have often treated each other with suspicion and mistrust. For many years, we have lived in stereotypes of each other, and only now we're really discovering each other. Thank you very much. Slava Ukraini!
Героям слава. Thank you so much for these insights. And now we are coming to the conclusion, to the ending of our discussion. But anyway, to bring some questions to our event, I'd like to ask both of you about perspectives of anti-Ukrainian and Eurosceptic parties in Bulgaria and Romania to succeed at the parliamentary elections, to the European Parliament elections, which will be held soon. And of course, that is a very precise note, which Mr. Dimitrov mentioned, that both Romania and Bulgaria do not obtain a large amount of seats in European Parliament because of population quotas. But anyway, given that there is a practice for European voters to support Eurosceptic parties during the parliamentary elections, which can be described as an attempt to show their disregard with Brussels policy that provides for such Eurosceptical parties opportunity to gain more votes during elections to the European Parliament, but in comparison to the national elections. So does that situation is comparable to the current situation is in Romania and Bulgaria as well, and whether the issue of Ukraine and especially European integration for Ukraine may become a topic for anti-Brussels propaganda in Bulgaria and Romania. So I do not have a specific suggestion who may address this issue. So you are welcome. Who would like to answer? So please, Igor. Yeah.
No, I can say that in terms of narratives opposing Ukraine's membership in the European Union, their number is in Bulgaria's country insignificant, because the discrediting European integration is currently is not the main focus of Russian propaganda, because firstly it's a distant prospect. And secondly, it is not as critical for Russia as Ukraine's membership in NATO. But as soon as there will be concrete negotiations on EU accession, Russian propaganda will definitely be switched on, involving all its forces and means. And according to the few narratives that are spreading now, that have been spreading till this moment, Ukraine's membership in the European Union should be is portrayed in Bulgaria by this Russian propaganda and disinformation as a threat to Bulgaria, as Ukraine has very powerful economic and agricultural potential that will suppress Bulgarian agriculture, and that Ukrainian farmers will begin to receive large European subsidies that were previously allocated to the European farmers, including the Bulgarian ones. And it is also argued that Ukraine's accession to the EU and NATO will not increase Bulgaria's security, because Ukraine has serious issues with Russia, which it will bring to these two organizations. So nowadays, to conclude, nowadays the anti-European Ukrainian integration propaganda in Bulgaria is not active, but if there are some concrete negotiations or crucial events, including Ukraine and European Union, then the propaganda will definitely be switched on.
Thanks, and yeah, I see that Mr. Dimitrov also have some notes, please.
I'd like to say that Ukrainian European Union membership is not on the table on the Bulgarian political debate for the time being. Now in Bulgaria, there is a debate whether to give military support to Ukraine or not. That's the debate. Maybe because Bulgarians are aware that the road to full membership is long. According to our own experience, there are negotiations and very complicated process. So Ukraine is, I can say, too far from EU membership now. And just because of the war, we discuss only this topic now. Otherwise, Igor is right that this narrative about large Ukrainian agriculture sector will be topical in the future. We already debated this problem, speaking about the import of Ukrainian agricultural products in Bulgaria and in European Union in general. So I think the case is similar to the case of Turkish candidacy for European Union membership, because both Ukraine and Turkey has a very big agricultural sector, and it will be influenced the budget of the European Union for sure, because I'm not sure, but maybe 1/3 of the budget of the European Union goes to support agriculture producers. But again, for the time being, we do not debate in Bulgaria prospects for European Union membership. Rather Ukrainian NATO membership is debatable now than the European Union.
Thanks for these insights. I see that Răzvan will bring us a Romanian perspective on that issue. So please.
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. To answer your question, I'm going to start with some numbers, with some percentages more exactly. Because the proportional respondents who identify Russia as responsible for the war decreased from 65% in 2023 to 55% in 2024, so a 10% decrease, according to a Globsec Trends report for 2024. For that reason, following the political parties' narrative in the last month, I think that the war in Ukraine is a rather second place or even third place issue. The first is being occupied by the West, or at least Romania's perception towards the West. And why I'm saying that because although few respondents view the US as one of their country's most strategic partners, Romania being a very committed US ally in the region on the eastern flank, the recognition of France, Germany, and the UK as strategic partners has increased. But on the other hand, as a threat, let's say, we are tempted by the far right ideologies, because 38% of respondents perceive far-right nationalism as a threat, which is feared that most of Romania's central and eastern neighborhood countries. To my humble opinion, I think that the main threat in Romania is not basically the anti-Ukrainian or pro-Russian narratives, as I previously mentioned. These are second place or even third place issues. The main issue, which comes from far-right populist parties, is the attitude towards Brussels and Washington. This is the main, let's say, narrative subject that is being exploited, because some Romanians actually lack public education on the issue, and there is a prevalence of narratives that portray the West as a whole, treating Romanians as second-class citizens, potentially provoking a longing for stronger nationalist response. We are being exploited, our country is being sold to foreigners or to Westerners, and so on and so forth. These are the narratives polluting the information space in Romania at the moment. And these are the ones that actually determine teenagers who tend to vote, at least theoretically, more progressive parties, to reorient themselves and vote for more radical, anti-Western, sovereignist, nationalist, populist parties who also happen to be at least more covertly anti-Ukrainian as well.
Thanks so much. And I think the last question, because we are unfortunately running out of the time, but I'd like to address the last question to our participants, as it was addressed to us, to Ukraine Crisis Media Center, before they went, about your observation of Russian activities in social networks. And I suppose that there may be some investigations and studies regarding this issue, how younger generation is whether it is vulnerable against pro-Russian narratives, especially in social networks. And maybe you may address about what platforms are more useful, and where the Russian disinformation activities are spread among Bulgarian or Romanian segment of social networks, and what is the platforms, whether it is Facebook, TikTok, maybe some other outputs. So please, maybe Roberta will address us this issue, please.
Yes, I would like to address this situation, especially because the social networks and the communication via the social networks was the basis of my thesis for different media generations. So this is quite familiar for me. And even though in my PhD thesis, I did not approach directly the subject of politics, it occurred to me, of course, in my investigations. So what I noticed is that while it appears at first that the younger generation is going to be digital native, it is quite not. They need our support and they need our help to process all the information that comes towards them, because the information is too vague, and they do not have yet all the instruments, the cognitive instruments to, process that information and like separate between what is good and what is bad, what is processed and reprocessed and reinterpreted, and what is factually true. So unfortunately, the fact that most of our young people escape towards TikTok and the Reels on Instagram, it's a bit complicated to follow. TikTok has an algorithm that does not care who you are, but will push all kind of information towards you, while on Instagram it's quite hard to make that algorithm work towards you. But this is something that probably most of the far-right politicians work towards more than all other politicians work towards. The other politicians, they are the political parties that are pro-European and pro-NATO, focused more on communicating via television, some messages that are resent on Instagram from other, I don't know, like the European Parliament or NATO. But apart from that, they do not make their own content as much as they could or they should in order to communicate to the young generation. And at the same time, there are the Facebook Reels, which is another black hole regarding the information that is provided via that channel. Especially because there are some nostalgia and some nostalgic memories that are reinterpreted and pushed towards the older generation that is not, again, as able to see which part of the truth is to be taken and which part of the information is to be left apart. So there's great need, literally is great need for research in this area. And I do believe that in the following period, I will push my efforts towards this. So yes, there's great need to watch over what's happening on the social media and on the social channels, because the far-right parties definitely took over the social networks more than any other party that supports EU and NATO in Romania right now. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And if you will need the Ukrainian perspective, Ukrainian Crisis Media Center is in your disposal, and all of the other initiatives to investigate on Russian and pro-Russian activities in social networking is very actual topics for us, for Ukraine, for our organization, and as well as other think tanks that develop and investigate on Russian informational activities. So thank you so much for this this analysis, and I think we may conclude that one of the main point is media literacy that should be implied, and in accordance to the new generations, to younger generation, it is very important to put attention on the educational process and how Russia is also trying, and this is the topic which may become a part of our further investigations, how Russia tried to intervene into the academic spheres of European countries, as well as other regions. So still we do have plenty of topics to discuss, and I think that our today's discussion was just a brief but very precise overlook of anti-Ukrainian activities, which mostly imposed by not just only by Russians but also by Eurosceptic forces in Bulgaria and Romania, and obviously there are many internal reasons for disrupting these informational activities. But anyway, I think we should focus on the topic of European integration of Ukraine and its importance and influence on international as well as international, but at first internal policy of Bulgaria and Romania. And I hope that we will implement further investigations. And I think in Ukraine, Ukraine Crisis Media Center is open to any forms of cooperation. And thank you so much for this fruitful discussion. Hopefully we will establish a beneficial cooperation.
This event was organised with the support of the European Union and the International Renaissance Foundation within the framework European Renaissance of Ukraine project. Its content is the exclusive responsibility of the authors and does not necessarily reflect the views of the European Union and the International Renaissance Foundation.